Joining us for our next segment will be Chuck Backus of the Arizona's Quarter Circle U Ranch, Joe Mayer of Oklahoma, and Nebraska's Terry Beller, and Tom Brink will be with us as well. Well, rather than go through the long, pedantic, drawn-out biography of each of these guys, they've all have noted careers. What we're going to do, in keeping with our theme of the story of a steak, we're going to let each of you tell your story a little bit about your business and how you came to be in this room, prepared to share your vision and wisdom with all these fine folks in the Angus business. We'll start right with you, sir.
I'm Chuck Backus, owner of the Quarter Circle U Ranch in Arizona. We've owned this ranch for 38 years. It's in the Superstition Mountains, which is very rugged country east of Phoenix. 15 years ago, we bought another Forest Service allotment in northern Arizona at 7,000 feet to take them in the summertime. Like all other Arizona ranchers, I had Brahma cross cattle in all those years. And 7 years ago, I decided I needed to change and start developing high-quality carcass animals. And I can't bring in new cows or heifers because they just die in my country. And so I started with AI with outstanding Angus semen and have been making a transition all those years and relatively good success.
Terry Beller, Lindsay, Nebraska. My dad started the feedlot in 1958 with a steer and a heifer as a wedding present from his parents. And we've expanded from those two head to right now about 6,000. I've got family involved, brother Mike, my son Wes, and they're back there doing what's got to be done so I can be here goofing off, I guess. But it's a great way of life. I have a passion for feeding cattle. I love to feed cattle. I love to feed good quality Angus cattle. I get a lot of compliments on our yard itself, on the steak feeds that I do. It's great to see the smiles on people's faces when they're indulging in a good steak right off the grill. So I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. Enjoy being to these things. I learn a lot being at these conferences, and getting hooked up with CAB back in 2000 was probably the best thing that I've done. It's been tremendous. The people that CAB has to work with are just a wealth of information, and it's a great business.
We've heard Tom's story. Joe?
Okay, I'm Joe Mayer from Guyman, Oklahoma. My great-grandfather come into that desert in 1883, and we're pretty dumb. We hadn't moved yet, so we've always been a cow-calf operation, and we've kind of got to make the cows pay the way. So we got into the high-end, high-quality Angus beef because that's where the money is. I mean, the cab program, we feed everything we raise and hang them on the rail at USPB, and so it just becomes it becomes apparent quickly that, hey, a pen of cattle, there's $500 or $600 difference between the best steers and the worst steers in that pen, and where the money is in the primes and the cabs. So we've just geared our operation to try to get all the primes and cabs that we can get. And to do that, we've used the tools that Angus has available. We do a lot of testing, gene max testing. We do a lot of 50K on our bulls, and the EPDs work. It's tools that's pretty easy to understand. Angus has been great to work with. There's some great people here that I'm on the phone with them almost every day. They get tired of hearing from me probably, but that's why we're doing what we're doing, is because we're trying to survive in the cattle business, and that's where the money is. So that's what we're trying to do.
Well, as entrepreneurs, you all had choices about which path to take and which inputs to use. When it came down to really making the decision, why Angus? What was the defining reason that took you down that path, and what's kept you with the breed and the people?
As I said, we started with Bremer Cross cattle, and we sent a group truck to the feedlot, and they didn't grade, which isn't surprising. And that's what decided me. You get the ones that grade, and that means Angus. And so we started with AI Angus bulls, and eventually changed our operation so that we could even buy Angus bulls, and they had to survive marginally. And we have a real challenge in Arizona. Our two places are rated, we need 100 acres per cow, and they're both horseback operations, and so it means a lot of riding and a lot of rough country to go with, but Angus was the only way to get us to our goal, which was to provide certified Angus beef product at the end. We retain ownership through the feedlot, to work very closely with the feedlot operator, very small operator who was given the CAB Small Feeder of the Year award some years ago. And so we retain ownership, we get individual carcass data back on each animal, and so we can call out the bottom as well as fortify the top of the grading scale.
I knew that we wanted to go Angus, I guess, and this is quite a few years ago. My brother Rick and I, we got in quite a string of heifers, and they were colored heifers, black, Charolais reds, not too many reds, but we sorted them for color, and we put the blacks in a couple pins, the Char crosses in another pin, and got the packer buyer out there when they got fat, and he says, "What are you doing this for?" I says, "Well, you're going to give us more money for the blacks." And we did. We got more money for the blacks, and that's when the grids started coming around with Angus America, and at the time it was a little plant in Norfolk, Nebraska called Beef America. And that buyer got us on the road to realizing there's quality cattle out there, and you can be rewarded for producing those. So that's when you drive by our yard now, and it's mostly black.
You know, my choice was really wide open in terms of what to build a genetic certification program on, but years and years in the cattle feeding business, kind of like Terry's saying, you get to see where the value really is, where the genetics really are, and there's to some degree there's good cattle in every breed, but there's not nearly as many, and it's not as commonplace as it's becoming in the Angus breed. And so to build a genetic certification program, I always say that markets divide from the top down. If you look at what CAB did, they divided the beef market. They segmented the beef market, and they did it from the top down. They started with the highest piece of quality and broke that off, in a sense, from the commodity market. That's really what I want to do in the feeder cattle market, because we still, to a significant degree, not 100%, but we still, to a significant degree, are a commodity market. And there's lots of black-hided cattle out there, but they're not all the same. There's lots of other cattle out there, too. But with genetic certification in the Angus breed, we know as cattle feeders what the top quartile of the Angus breed can do in terms of value creation. So that's really what drove my decision.
Well, my family, we was a straight Hereford operation for the first 100 years. And we went through all the gyrations that the industry went through. We had some Charolais, and we had some Gelbys, and Gelbys good cattle, they just won't marble. But when they started paying more money for better carcasses, the choice to go Angus was pretty obvious. They had the genetics, the cattle marbled better. The breeders was very innovative and provided lots of data that, I mean, everybody tells you how good their cattle are. I wanted somebody to show me how good their cattle were, and the Angus people had that through their EPDs and so on and so forth. I mean, you just go into any packing plant in America, and the top dollar carcasses are probably 95% Angus, and so it's an obvious choice. I mean, you can't buck the market; you have to get in the market.
Well, what I'm hearing, and I think it's interesting that there's a target that's got some reward affiliated with it, and you saw it and you went for it. You didn't wait around; you went for it. One of the things that I'm always interested in is, and you've started to allude to this a little bit, but it's good cattle that you know are good. So which of the tools, the services, maybe the technologies that Angus has provided as part of their suite of services that have really helped you focus in with a laser-like precision to really improve the product you're making and do a better job as a producer?
Well, of course, Angus has been the leader in the whole beef industry and bringing in new technology and developing new techniques. And you just keep adopting all of those as they come along. And I have a background as an engineer by education, and so I'm a numbers guy. And I've gotten to the point that I don't even need to look at a bull or see a picture of a bull, just give me the numbers. And so I use the technology extensively. The bulls I buy, I require that they have all of the EPDs, genetically improved, and ultrasound measurements on the particular bulls I'm buying. And now I'm requiring that they all have RFI, the efficiency measurement, on bulls that I buy, because I think that's the next big holy grail in the cattle industry of conversion efficiency. So I use all those numbers in the selection of bulls, whether it's AI semen or the live bulls I buy. And so it's all a matter of numbers to me, and numbers don't lie too often. So I rely on all the technology that the Angus has developed over these years. And as of last Monday, we have enough Angus percentage in my herd, so I sent a G-Max Advantage sample in of my heifers. So as those things come along, I try to adapt them.
I guess at the feedlot level, you've got to pass that information on to the rancher. There's no way that you guys out there can improve your herds by guessing. You got to know. Before we became CAB certified licensed as a feedlot, we would, and I didn't do a very good job of it, I will admit, that try and get that information back to the rancher. I mean, they look at it as Bible. I mean, they want to know. And over the years, I don't have one rancher that's come back to me to use their data, their good data, to get more money. It's a cooperative thing. We've got to work together. And that's one thing nice. When I did become licensed with CAB, they took over that whole paperwork thing, got all that data back to the rancher, and we've expanded on that. The Angus breed has made huge leaps and bounds. I mean, I remember when, we'd get 30% or 40% CAB in prime in a group of cattle, and boy, those are good cattle. And that's not too long ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago. Now we're pushing, well, my goal is 100. I want to get 100% CAB in prime. I'm close. I got 97, 96. They're out there. And those groups are just fun to feed.
A top dollar Angus program, of course, we focus on growth and carcass traits. So it's the EPDs and the indexes, which I always tell people when I look at a bull sale catalog or a stud book from an AI company, I probably look at it differently than just about anybody else, maybe other than Terry, but because I'm always thinking about, boy, these genetics would create outstanding feeder cattle. And that's, you guys need to be thanked again, because if you look at a bull sale catalog, you look at your own bull sale catalog, and you look at the numbers, and if they're on the higher end, you really don't understand probably, or even maybe fully appreciate sometimes, the value that you're creating for the rest of the beef industry. It's just outstanding, and it's getting better and better every year. And also another thing that I'm involved in as part of my program is the DNA testing with GeneMax, which has been mentioned a little bit. GeneMax is a great tool. It's an Angus-specific tool. What I'm seeing in a lot of the herds that I'm working with is every herd has a tail end. You know, in highly selected herds, they'll have a lot of high scores, but they'll still have a little bit of a tail end. In lower selected herds that maybe haven't been, really focused on for growth and carcass, they'll have a whole bunch on the lower end, but everybody can benefit from getting those individual scores. And I look at it like this: if you're keeping replacement heifers, just before you pick any of them, get rid of the bottom end. It may only be the bottom 10 or 20%, and you still have lots of other heifers to pick from. So that's a great tool. The GeneMax tool is a great tool, and I think we're just figuring out ways that it can be used.
To me, the carcass data is number one, and so we devour that carcass data, and we trace everything back to, what bull's that out of, what cow's that out of. But to me, the carcass data trumps everything. We use we GeneMax every calf born on the place. We do that for a couple reasons. One, to get the GeneMax score, and then probably the main reason for us anymore is to get the sire, and you do get the sire with the GeneMax scores if you 50K'd all the bulls. EPDs are wonderful. We use those a lot. High accuracy EPDs are a lot more valuable than low accuracy EPDs. So for it to really mean something, I look for high accuracy EPDs. I also like to see that 50K score, because that validates the EPDs. And I'm looking for every tool I can find to help me get to where I want to be as fast as I can go.
If we think back to Lowell Catlett's talk this morning a little bit, and the technological innovations that are occurring that he mentioned, and then Tom's discussion around those sort of old traditional practices, and then sort of the emerging, and then the really cutting edge technologies, particularly for folks who are maybe a little bit newer to the business and some of our younger producers in the room, you might share a little bit about how you've learned to approach new technologies and innovations, and how what's the trigger point that gets you to say, all right, we're gonna give this a run because it's time, and what are the things that maybe make you more cautious as you approach new technologies?
The real numbers are the important thing. I think that and the high accuracy ones, that much more important to use in selection. But I guess I would urge people not to be timid in taking on projects, such as a total change of your herd in my case. And I knew it was a 10-year project, and I was 70 years old when I decided to do that. So not every 70-year-old will take a 10-year project on. I'm almost through with it now, and very successful. My goal was to get CAB kind of cattle, and the calves that came out this summer from the feedlot, I had out of 150 calves, I guess, 100% of them were choice or better, 44% were prime, and 80% qualified for CAB. So I'm a little ahead of schedule on my 10-month program, but don't be timid in taking on projects. In Arizona, that was a special challenge. You don't hear the word Arizona and quality cattle in the same sentence usually. And it's a difficult thing to do. It's a very harsh environment. And I look at my job as putting the best genetics I can into my calves and then trying to keep them alive until I can get them to a feedlot to express those genetics. So don't shy away from especially challenging opportunities and at any age.
I agree. My father kind of instilled that into me, that you're not going to get ahead, you're going to fall behind if you don't get out there and take some chances. In the feedlot, the bottom line is going to dictate a lot of how big of a chance you want to take on some of those advancing decisions, but it's the what do I say? I guess my dad always instilled in me to be proud of what you do, and I think the fact that I take a lot of pride in the cattle that I feed, and the good relationships with the ranchers that I feed for and feed with. It comes full circle.
I think no matter if you're more of a risk-averse type person or not so much, I think one great thing to do is just do experiments. And sometimes you can do them on a small scale to learn. I've been involved in lots of that. In the cattle feeding business, there's always lots of new technology and new things to try. And I've been involved in many just small scale, couple pens or whatever it is, just let's learn. They say this product will do X. Well, let's test it and see if it works in our environment or in my operation, with its uniquenesses and so forth. So I think that's a great way. I've been involved in genetic experiments, and those are extremely educational, though they take time. I think, like was mentioned here. But to me, if you're not doing some of that, at least if you're not engaged in maybe trying one new thing a year, one or two new things a year, doesn't have to mean you change everything you're doing. But we all should be involved in that because this industry is moving forward. And we do have competition both internally and externally, and so we've got to do our homework, we've got to learn and keep learning, and we have to selectively grab that new technology. And one of the best ways to me is just test it on a small scale and then decide what to do from there.
Yeah, I will echo what Tom Brink said. We'll try almost any new technology. We may try it on a small scale, then we'll validate it. If it works, we'll go full bore. If it doesn't work, we'll say, hey, that was a dumb idea, I shouldn't have done it. It didn't break us, so we'll forget that one and try the next one.
So I'm hearing a little bit about risk, about the willingness to accept a level of failure on a small scale. You fail forward, fail fast, fail cheap. There's a lot of people in this room who heard a message from our chef today. It's time to expand. We want more of what you're producing, not the same amount, not less. We want more. So there's an entrepreneurial environment swirling around this business right now. There are plenty of limitations and challenges, but the overarching message is let's go make something happen. Each of you have built something. You've added value. You've created some size and scale to ventures. Just from a perspective of the entrepreneur, the guy who's got the business in the air and making it fly, what would you tell folks who are ready and thinking about it's time to scale up, it's time to start, it's time to try something new? What advice would you give them as an entrepreneur who's had some success?
I guess I would answer that with my latest soapbox, and that is feed conversion efficiency. It's amazing what, thanks to GrowSafe, we can actually measure individual conversion efficiency of animals. And if you use that conversion efficiency as a selection criteria, you can greatly increase your capacity for carrying cattle on whatever land you have. And if we're going to produce more beef with less land and for more people to feed the world, we're going to have to do that. I've been following that very carefully and using that as selection criteria for all of my bulls. And I visited a ranch in South Dakota this summer. They have a 2-year-old bull that had if you're familiar with RFIs, a residual feed intake, which is sort of the more uniform way of comparing with others, had an RFI of minus 14 point something. That means that he would eat 14 pounds of feed less per day than another bull, than what you would expect from another bull. Each day, whatever a bull consumes, 20, 25 pounds a day, typically. His feed to conversion ratio was 2.6 to 1. Now, folks, that's almost as good as a chicken. That's phenomenal that any bovine animal can convert feed 2.6 to 1 of meat. So I can foresee the day that, well, I may not live to see it, but in 20 or 30 years, we could actually run twice the amount of cattle on the same land with the same impact on our forage as we do today. So I would encourage people to look at that as a way of expanding their herds in the near future.
I think that's a good point. As a feedlot operator, I have to look at all those numbers, take that all into consideration when I'm out, bidding for cattle. The main thing to keep our business alive is what Tom mentioned earlier with our younger people and keeping everybody's dream going. My father, he says, Terry, you're living my dream. He wasn't able to do some of the things that I'm doing now. I've got great help. We have a larger operation than what he had. He wasn't able to take off and go do some of the things that I'm able to. And even myself, I'm looking ahead. All right, my son and my daughter, who's in the hospital now, maybe having our first grandchild. I'm looking ahead to my kids and how am I going to pass this down? And I think it's important that we think about that a lot and plan ahead, because the Angus business is definitely alive and well and moving forward.
I might take just a little bit different angle on this question. It's a good question. The kind of the mantra that I try to use is, and it goes back to what we were saying before, is fail small so you can win big. And what that means is take a risk, take a risk of calculated size, so if it doesn't work out, you failed small and you've learned a lot. And I'll never forget I was at my son's pitching lesson. This is some years ago. He was a pretty good pitcher. And I was sitting there about half asleep as he was going with the coach, through working on his technique and everything. And this guy had been a major league pitcher himself and was now a pitching coach. And he said something that really woke me up. He said, the problem with baseball is there's so much failure in it. And I'd never thought about that, but think about batting averages, for example. Somebody that hits 300 is doing really well, right? You have to deal with failure in baseball, and you have to have a mindset that you're going to fail a percentage of the time, but you have to get back up and go up to the plate and and go at it again if you're going to be a big league hitter and you're going to be successful, right? Our business is like that. And I remember at the time saying, that's the cattle business. You know, we deal with a significant percentage of failure because of sometimes things in our control, a lot of times things out of our control with the weather and whatnot, and we have to stomach all that. We have to take that in, and we have to be willing to go back up to the plate and go again. And I think it was a good day for me when I changed the mindset of everything I did to realizing there is going to be a percentage of failure in what I do. And whether it's risk management, whether it's, you know, breeding selections, whether it's, you know, whatever it is, trying new products and right on down the list. So understand that, but try to make that at a size that you can tolerate failure so you can learn. And then, like Joe was saying earlier, then if something works, you're ready to wholesale adopt it and really take advantage of it. I think that's a good approach.
Tom, you got 2 cow-calf guys that feed cattle, you got 2 feedlot guys. Hey, we're all about risk. I mean, you can't be in this business unless you have a little bit of appetite for risk. But, you know, sometimes the biggest risk of all is to not take a chance on something new, to not try something new, because you're stuck in that rut. You're not advancing. You're not trying something. You're not trying to figure out a better, quicker way to get there. That's the biggest risk of all.
You know, I find it curious. Or go ahead, Tom.
It seems like there's a lot of times when we're not willing to think outside of the standard cliches, and that's one thing. I think the most successful people I knew were not and know today don't accept the status quo. They don't accept that kind of conventional or traditional mindset that such and such can't be done. You know, they'll think outside that. It goes back to the low birth, high growth. You know, how many years ago did a lot of people say that? I mean, a lot of people in this industry said that. And the Angus breed, as much as anybody, showed that that doesn't have to be true. And thinking outside of the standard and saying, you know, yeah, it can't be done today, but I believe if I do X and work at it, I can do it tomorrow. I think that's huge to success for all of us.
You know, it's clear that all 4 of you are curious. I mean, Chuck, you left the low-tech industry of nuclear engineering to come to the high-tech industry of the cattle business. You're learners. It's clear we all get caught up in working in our business. That fence needs fixed, those cattle need fed, that thing needs done. How do you make space to learn, to seek new information, to understand the technologies that are emerging? Is there a process you use? What is it that lets you have that competitive edge of being this lifelong, consistent learner, this curious entrepreneur?
I would suggest you just keep asking questions. I'm in the cow-calf business. I'm a commercial guy. I always will be a commercial guy. But in order for me to make money, everyone in the chain has to make money. And so you've got to talk to everybody in the chain. And I have a very close relationship with my feedlot owner, manager, in Oklahoma, 900 miles. I have to ship my calves to get there. But my job is to deliver him the calves with the capability to try to fit them into any of the premium programs that are available. And there's more and more all the times of different niches which people will pay more money for to take advantage of. I can't be an expert in that final market analysis and preparation of the cattle, so I send my calves to him after talking to him and continually talking to him, and I'll visit with him tomorrow, is that I will send him natural prepared calves that have growth and marbling capability, and his job is to feed them out and to interface with the next chain of the packing houses, what programs are being offered, what premiums are being offered, and then market my cattle to those markets to maximize the income for me. I don't have to be an expert in all those things, but I have to ask the questions and find the people to trust and work with in order to achieve the ultimate goal.
It's definitely the people that I work with, the ranchers. A lot of times, and my wife will get pretty upset at me at night. I'll be on the phone till 10 o'clock talking to ranchers. You know, they got questions, and it's sometimes very simple questions, but it's important that they share what they're concerned about with what I'm concerned about, and it's always a group effort to figure things out, to move forward. And to answer your question there, I think it's just you have to be open-minded and ask a lot of questions. To think that you're going to go out there and figure things out, it takes a lot of reading, a lot of phone calls at night, and it's part of the business.
I would really just echo that. I mean, one thing I've always tried to do is read kind of broadly and outside of just, the industry to get a different perspective. You never know where an idea is going to come from. I mean, you can learn a lot by doing that. But I think the other thing, and this is just restating what these guys have already said, and that is the networking aspect, talking to people. I mean, I really rarely go to a meeting, probably never go to a meeting that I don't walk out of there, whether it was something somebody said or a side conversation I had with an idea, with a new contact, with something that I can learn, something that somebody said that gave me maybe a little better understanding or a little clarity on something I'd been wrestling with in my own mind. So I think that's a lot of it is networking. And just like this meeting, I mean, there's so much collective knowledge here. We used to have this saying that nobody is as smart as everybody, and I absolutely believe that. The collective knowledge of a group like this is incredible, and so I want to try to tap into that myself as much as I can.
And I'd echo that. You surround yourself with really sharp people that have brilliant ideas, and you can steal their ideas pretty cheap and use them. I mean, I've got a veterinarian that I love him to death, but he's always saying, well, maybe you ought to try this, and I will, you just have to surround yourself with, because you can't come up with all this stuff. You've got to surround yourself with people that also have good ideas, adopt those, share those ideas. Network, I think, was the word they used. My seed stock producer is a great asset. I'm on the phone bugging him all the time about, gee, what does this EPD really mean, and so on and so forth. But you just got to surround yourself with the people that are on the move. If they're static, not going anywhere, they can't help you much. So,
just a couple more questions, and my next to last question. If our goal is to produce a great product for the world's consumers, and to do that with profit and in a manner in which we can pass enterprises on to the next generation, if you were starting your career, what's the one problem you'd try to solve that would move us forward the fastest?
It's nice you give us easy questions. I guess things change all the time, and so one has to keep up with the literature and get very smart before you make that decision. But starting today is quite different than starting even 10 years ago. And I have always considered my advantage of being an engineer very advantageous, and looking at numbers and comparing and evaluating and reaching decisions to do that. But it will change in the next 10 years even more. And so it's going to be hard for our next generation to choose those things, but they have to be informed before they try to choose that.
I would hate to get started today. I mean, the money that it takes to a lot of the ranches that I go to in Wyoming, South Dakota, Montana, those guys are Chuck's age, you know, a lot of them 70. There's not a lot of young people out there. And you almost have to start this business in the business already. For somebody just to go out and there's that big learning curve, and I would hate to do it. You know, I come out of high school, I had no desire to go to college. I wanted to work for my dad, and I was glad I did. But to think, what's the one problem? I think it would just be the mere equity that it would take.
That's a big hurdle. You know, feed efficiency has been mentioned. I think that is, as Chuck said, you know, a big one to tackle for our industry over the coming years. And there's a lot of opportunity with it. I mean, I think we understand that, and you kind of spoke to that. I think the DNA world is exciting. I mean, what we're starting to do with those tools and what we can do and ways to apply it. It's not just the technology. The technology is kind of high science in my mind, but the application of that technology in very practical ways is extremely interesting to me, and I think we've just barely scratched the surface on that. The other thing is still we are, I guess that I would mention that's kind of in my everyday world is we're still a segmented industry. You know, we don't communicate real well. I mean, the guys up here, these are unique examples, and unfortunately in too many cases where feedlot and cow-calf guys are talking to each other and they really understand each other's business. There's too many in our industry that aren't like that. We understand that, and so bridging that gap and really getting each other to work together to grow the total pie. I mean, there's so much opportunity there, but we don't, you know, we're transactional. We're way too transactional in this business. It's one trade to the next, one group of cattle to the next. We don't often think about, you know, long-term partnerships and making the total value bigger, making the top line bigger so we can all get more. We just tend to think too often, you know, this transaction, you know, get the most I can and then worry about next year. And that's unfortunate. And there is a lot of opportunity if we work, bridge the gaps between the segments, understand each other, educate each other, and work together.
This is a little bit off the wall, but if I was magic, I could double the speed at which we advance if we could only do away with about half the very well-meaning but totally stupid rules and regulations that come down from the government. And that the tax structure to be in this business makes it so darn hard to pass what generations have worked for on down to the next generation, to give them a start, to let them have a running shot at this deal. We've got to somehow get a handle and get some rules and regulations that make sense, do something with our tax structure that doesn't just stifle free enterprise. And I don't know how to solve that. Yesterday was a good start, but you know, that's really a burden on not only this industry, but our whole free enterprise system.
Absolutely, well said, well said. I believe with all my heart there's, for the first time in my lifetime, a generation of people who are younger than me, which now is a lot more people, who actually have more hope about this industry and about agriculture than in all the generations before them, probably back to nearly Jefferson's times. They've seen what it means to be profitable. They've seen the opportunity for technology and innovation to occur. And I think if we're as leaders, if we can apply entrepreneurship and innovation to the policy world and to banking and to finance we'll open doors for them. So my last question to you guys, the last thing I'd like to learn from you today, a decade down the road, what's this business look like and what's the role of Angus cattle in that future?
The future is certainly in quality meat product. And again, independent of the price, we have to have a quality product that people really enjoy and they're willing to pay for it. As we learned this afternoon, there's a lot of money out there that people have, and they want to enjoy that money, and we can give them the opportunity to do that. But I think in order to help get there, we're going to have to work a lot more with the end customer than we have in the past. We, the ranchers, have to get people out to our ranches and show them what we do. There's this growing concern about how do we treat our calves or our animals in general, and we have to dispel that. That's a huge, I think, detriment to our whole future. And we try to do that in our case of having tours of the ranch of people. And my daughter who's with me today, she was talking to the CAB people, the marketing people, about how do we stimulate knowledge of ranching and the story of the steak to the Phoenix area, which is our population center. And what can we do with CAB to promote education and adoption and information about, well, there's at least one local rancher that produces CAB beef, and so get the people out to your ranches and show them what we're doing. They can take terrible pictures of some of the things we do, but we have to counter that with having them at our ranch, talking to them and letting them know we're genuinely considerate and appreciative and really appreciate our animals, and we take care of them. And if we don't make money. It's a pretty simple formula. So let's try to be more conscious of the end consumer wherever we are in the chain.
One thing you touched on there was, animal husbandry. The care that you give the animals is super important. There's a lot of groups out there that are kind of laying in the weeds waiting for something to come up that would, really throw a wrench in our everyday operations and would give them a wild card to get out there and put us down, I guess. But looking ahead 10 years, I'm really confident. I mean, you go to steakhouses and people love to socialize over a good meal. There's nothing better than getting done with a steak meal with your family, friends, and man, that was good. Let's do this again. And we're all part of that. We're the ones that supply that quality. If I look back 10 years, maybe the advancements that we've had this past 10 years aren't going to be as much the next 10 years because we've improved so much, but I think quality is definitely here to stay. With our recent price increases in the whole meat complex, the quality beef hasn't probably been such an item because everything else has come up, and now the good meat is maybe not overpriced. So my outlook is good. I'm confident I'm going to hang in there another 10 years. Hopefully get up on another panel and then I can correct myself.
Those are very good points, and I think we can all be confident in the demand for beef, and it's amazing. We learned a lot this year. We never thought we could sell as much beef as we have, even though production's down, but look at the price. And we're bringing more total top-line dollars into this business by a long shot than we ever have. That speaks incredibly well for demand. If you just looked at the number of dollars coming into the beef business this year versus last year, you'd love to own a business like that, and we all own a little piece of it, I guess. So that's encouraging. The quality message, I don't think that changes. I mean, like we've said, that's where the dollars are. It's been interesting to me, and you may or may not know this, but over the last 10 years, I've had a lot of involvement with grids. The grid, here's something you may not know. The grids have actually become more lenient on yield grade. And why is that? Because they're trying to get quality. They're trying to relax a little bit more on one side so they can get more quality. That tells you what's selling and what is really driving it. I see in the future for Angus, I think is tremendous. I think you have a gene pool that is way ahead of the pack. It's bigger. we don't all have to do one thing. I mean, I think that we have to think about the whole supply chain, but there's a lot of different environments that the cattle have to work in, you know, like the two gentlemen up here. You know, you've got some tougher environments, and yet they're still interested in carcass quality. That's a great thing. And so I think the Angus breed will continue to lead. One thing that I do see too is more specification production. We don't have a lot of that. You know, we don't really, in many cases, have a target. I think we're starting to see what that target is. And for many people, it can be, especially with Angus genetics, it can be a high-end target. But we're going to see more specifications. I think we're going to see more opportunity, just like my program, you know, with specific genetics being certified and then offering a premium. We're going to see more opportunity with programs like that.
Well, in 10 years, we all saw Lowell Catlett's slides this morning. There's going to be more people. They're going to have more money. They're going to want to buy good steak. So I think our future in the cattle business is very bright. We'll have our ups and downs. We always have. What's the role of Angus in 10 years? You know, and that kind of depends in part on this breed association and where we go. I mean, Angus has been the innovative breed that's out there doing the things that move us forward big steps at a time. If we continue to do that, Angus will still be at the top of the heap. If we relax, if we don't do that, somebody can knock us off the pile. That's just the way the world works. So, you know, it's kind of in our own hands what our future is in the next 10 years.
Great comments. Let's thank our panel. Thank you so much.